Abraham Lincoln remains one of US history's most celebrated presidents. An essential part of his legacy is the idea that he abolished slavery.
I can't accomplish a goddamn thing of any human meaning or worth until we cure ourselves of slavery and end this pestilential war.
But is that claim actually true? It turns out that Lincoln's legacy is actually more complicated and far less heroic than popular culture might have us believe. Firstly, Abraham Lincoln was not an abolitionist. Lincoln did state that slavery was morally wrong, but this doesn't mean that he devoted his life to ending it, or that he necessarily believed in actual equality between black and white people. Although he claimed to hate it as much as any abolitionist, Lincoln still held that slavery was protected by the Constitution, which, at the time of his presidency, gave slave owners the right to capture and return fugitive or runaway slaves, and relegated slaves to the status of 3/5 of a free person. Actual abolitionists demanded that slavery should be ended immediately, and that freed enslaved people deserved immediate equal status as all other people in society. In 1854, well before he was president, Lincoln publicly suggested that he would free all the slaves and send them to Liberia, which had been established as a colony in 1821. Lincoln would hold on to this colonialist idea of sending black people to another country for years to come. In contrast, in the same year, actual abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison openly criticized the US Constitution as a covenant with death and an agreement with hell, burning a copy in public. When Lincoln was running for the US Senate, he was involved in a series of public debates with his opponent, Stephen Douglas, who repeatedly accused him of supporting equality for black people. In their fourth debate in September 1858, Lincoln said the following: "I am not, nor ever have been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say in addition to this that there is a physical difference between the white and black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality." Lincoln's belief that slavery was wrong did not equate to him seeing black people as equals. At best, they were inferior and simply deserved to live separately. "I do not perceive that because the white man is to have the superior position, the Negro should be denied everything. I do not understand that because I do not want a Negro woman for a slave, I must necessarily want her for a wife. My understanding is that I can just let her alone." Lincoln's election in 1860 was one of the main triggers for the Civil War that soon followed. While it is true that slavery was a major factor that sparked the war, the common explanation is that Lincoln simply wanted to abolish slavery and that the Confederacy wanted to defend it. This isn't the full picture. It's true that Lincoln and the Republicans ran on a platform opposed to slavery, but this was for multiple reasons. Greater industrialization had made slavery less useful and efficient as a means of organizing labor and production in northern states. As states expanded west across the continent, many saw slave labor as unfair competition for jobs and felt that new territories should be for exclusively white labor. Others thought slave labor gave southern states an unfair advantage in certain forms of manufacture and production. Some also saw large slave populations, counted as 3/5 the size of free populations, as something that could lead to southern states gaining greater representation in Congress, a larger share of the Electoral College, and more influence in the federal government and the presidency. Very few were actually motivated by abolition. Lincoln's actual election was the trigger for the war. The newly established Republican Party had won just 40% of the vote. Southern states feared a federal government that could make laws interfering with the South's right to keep slaves, as well as to prevent them from taking slaves into expanding territories. Lincoln had not even been on the ballot in the South. His victory, without a single Southern vote, was a sign to Southern states that they were now at the mercy of a government over which they had no influence. In 1861, the Corwin Amendment, also known as the Slavery Amendment, was passed by Congress. It would have banned the federal government from abolishing the institution of slavery in the states where it existed at the time. Supporters of the amendment hoped it would prevent Southern states from seceding from the Union. Lincoln did not oppose the measure, and it was only the war that prevented it from actually being ratified. The South seceded before Lincoln could even be inaugurated on Monday, March 4, 1861. Emancipation was a military strategy. Lincoln's priority in the Civil War was preventing a permanent split in the Union, not taking a definitive moral stand on slavery. Lincoln stated, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." As the Civil War entered the summer of 1862, thousands of enslaved people had fled southern plantations to come north, where there was no clear plan on what to do with them. Emancipation could further undermine the Confederacy while providing the Union with a new source of manpower and recruits to fight the Southern Rebellion. Intense pressure to end slavery was also building behind the scenes from military leaders, other Republicans, abolitionists, and slaves themselves. Lincoln realized that he could save the Union only by issuing an Emancipation Proclamation, which he had drafted. But Lincoln still believed in colonization, the idea of removing black people from America as a solution to slavery. As he prepared a draft of the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation in August of 1862, he hosted a delegation of free black men and women at the White House, hoping to win their support for an idea to send black people to Central America. He even supported a bill in Congress that would set aside funds for such a purpose. Lincoln's support of such measures created outrage among black leaders and abolitionists alike. Frederick Douglass called Lincoln a colonization preacher, who had made himself look ridiculous by suggesting that black people should leave the nation of their birth. Lincoln was forced to drop the idea, removing it from the final proclamation that was issued later in January 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation actually freed very few people. Since Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation as a military measure, it actually didn't even apply to border slave states like Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, who were loyal to the Union. Lincoln also exempted selected areas of the Confederacy that had already come under Union control, hoping to gain the support of white populations in those states. The proclamation was aimed at destabilizing the South, where Lincoln's government had no control, and also no ability to enforce the freedom of any enslaved people. The proclamation did, however, provide a further step for abolitionists to continue pushing for an actual end to slavery. By the time the Civil War ended, around 200,000 black men had served in the Union Army and Navy. In his final speech in 1865, Lincoln argued that any black man who had served the Union during the Civil War should have the right to vote. It was the 13th Amendment, adopted on December 18, 1865, after Lincoln's assassination, which more comprehensively ended the institution of slavery. So, was Abraham Lincoln really the great emancipator?